It was a peaceful, dark night. The stars were shining in all their glory as I snuggled up in the front seat of my car. We had been driving for 10 hours. It was now my friend Gibby, Mark Gibson's, turn to take the wheel, and it was 2 a.m. We were in rural South Dakota, just south of Mount Rushmore, heading to Idaho to surprise my parents for Easter. It was Good Friday morning when all of a sudden my friend Mark wakes me up because he thinks he saw something. Sure enough, as I look out into the dark, cold night, I saw 2 big, blazing eyes staring back at us. We had no idea what it was. We continued to roll along cautiously to find out that it was an entire herd of buffalo. Yes, we were in Custer State Park, and if you know, there's free-roaming buffalo in Custer State Park. We never knew that we chose a route that would get us directly into this part where the buffalo roam freely in the middle of the night. The disciples were experiencing quite a similar night on the Sea of Galilee. They were fishermen and probably made this trip hundreds of times, but this day was different. The previous day, they had witnessed Jesus multiply a boy's lunch into a feast for thousands. They had been rowing for hours, and at this point, their arms were probably as useful as limp noodles. Their bodies were spent, and their brains must have been close to shutting down also. It was not an ordinary trip across the sea this time. They were pressing with all their energy just to keep the boat in an upright position in the middle of the sea, all while trying to put 2 and 2 together about what just happened the last day when Jesus multiplied this food into thousands of helpings. And it was at this point that the Gospel of Mark informs us that Jesus, from where he was praying on the mountainside on the side of the Sea of Galilee, saw the disciples 3 miles out on the sea struggling. And so Jesus went out to them. As if the disciples had not gone through enough, now they see someone walking on the water to them. Their minds couldn't take it anymore, and they were filled with fear, shouting, "It's a ghost!" But Jesus, his voice from the water, says to them, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." What courage we can have knowing that Jesus is there. Jesus is calling us today to take courage and to walk on the water of faith towards him and with him. Peter was a great man of faith. Throughout the Bible, Peter is set as an example of faith. And just two chapters later, Jesus says this about Peter, "And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it." And then remember Peter and the rooster? Peter was sure that he was not going to ever disown Jesus. And so he said to Jesus, "Even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you." But it wasn't long after that statement that the rooster crowed because he disowned Jesus 3 times. And then we look, of course, to the Sea of Galilee, our gospel for today. And Peter does not disappoint again, as he immediately is the one who speaks out to Jesus as Jesus is walking to them on the lake. "Lord, if it is you, tell me to come to you on the water." Peter was his bold self and was ready to walk on the water of faith. Or was he? Life is full of surprises, isn't it? Sometimes things just don't happen the way you expect them to happen, and leave you wondering, what are we going to do now? The head gasket on the car just cracked. We can't afford to fix that. There's no more water coming in our house because the well just went out. How are we going to get through a night like this? Your Social Security checks were just cut in half. How am I going to live now? You just fell and broke your arm, and you're unable to work. How am I going to provide for my family? These situations and many others do not have an easy answer, because these surprises come and blindside us as if we never saw them coming. We cry, what in the world are we going to do now? In all these life experiences, surprises are not, are you ready to walk on the water of faith? To cry to Jesus, Jesus, if it is you, tell me to come out to you on the water. Was Peter ready? He certainly thought he was. Jesus certainly had confidence in him, and after Peter asked him to tell him to come, what does Peter do? Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, Lord, save me! Was Peter just plain ignorant? Surely no man can walk on water. But Peter's faith spoke plain and clear and expressed what words cannot express. He walked on water. Jesus had suspended the laws of nature for a time and allowed Peter to do what no man had done before. So what caused Peter to sink? Did he not have enough faith? Was his focus on the wrong thing? Peter wasn't thinking about the wild wind and waves that were beating the boat. He was thinking about one thing. I need to get out to Jesus. Peter was sure that he had overcome his fear, and he began to walk on the water. But the wind and the waves were too much for Peter, and his focus on faith was overcome by fear. We've all seen it before, either in our own families or in others. When someone takes a turn for the worst and is on a downward spiral only to be drowned in sorrow and despair. And so we also then get caught up in the downward spiral of despair. Once we turn to our own abilities and realize there is no way we can do it, we begin to sink. We want to be able to do it, and we want to be able to survive, but when the time comes and when we begin to feel helpless, then maybe, just maybe, we cry out as Peter did, Lord, save me! Don't sink, but trust in the Lord's confidence that He has instilled in you when He tells you, come. He told Peter to come. And He tells you to come. You are capable of walking on the water of faith towards Jesus. Surprises in life cannot prevent us from walking on the water, but they can deter us. And it's at that moment when all the troubles of this life, all the distractions deter us, that Jesus then lifts us up and calls on us to walk on the water of faith with him. Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught Peter. "You have little faith," he said. "Why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Peter was ready for help. He knew at that moment Jesus was his only help. Peter was done walking towards Jesus. Now he was ready to walk on the water of faith with Jesus back to the boat. Way back when, in the earlier part of the 1400s BC, there was a Levite woman who needed help. The Egyptians had decreed that all the boys who were born must be killed. And this woman, who had just given birth to a healthy young boy and did not want her baby to be killed, she wrapped her child up in a basket and placed him in the Nile River. A little down the river, Pharaoh's daughter saw the basket and found out there was a baby inside. So she had compassion on the boy. She pulled him up and she named him Moses, which means to draw out, because she drew him out of the water. Well, we know the rest of the story. Moses became a great leader of the Israelites, as we just read in Numbers, completing his service there. For 40 years, he led them through the exile as they wandered through the desert. He also penned the first 5 books of the Bible and is probably remembered as one of the greatest characters of the Bible. The entire time Moses was floating down the river, he was extremely helpless, but he was safe. God had a plan for Moses and used Pharaoh's daughter to keep him safe. If we look at the rest of the life story of Moses, we could say that Moses was definitely walking on the water of faith with Jesus. Jesus may have not been in visibly bodily form present there with Moses, but the life journey of Moses reveals several times where God was helping him along his way. Jesus was there for Moses, as he was for Peter, and he's reaching out his hand there to us as well. Jesus is ready to walk on the water of faith with you. In fact, he probably will end up carrying you and carrying most of the weight the whole way. You know that familiar poem, Footprints in the Sand? It draws that picture so well. Have you recently looked behind you to see how many footprints there are? And all you find out is that there's one set. Jesus promises that he will never leave us nor forsake us. So when you only find one set of footprints behind you, those are not your footprints. Remember, that was Jesus carrying you along the way. It's not always easy to trust that Jesus is there. So many times I have felt lost and confused and not know what to do in my life. Where was Jesus then? I needed him and I was drowning and he wasn't there. It was as though he picked me up just to let me drown again. But dear friends, it isn't Jesus who leaves us. It is us who depart from him. We lose trust in him when we slowly drift away from his word. We lose faith in him. We don't turn to him for forgiveness. we drown when we begin to put our trust in ourselves. When I look back at college and how I began to question how in the world would I ever pay for this tuition, I hear Jesus saying to me, "You have little faith. Why did you doubt?" It is in our human nature to doubt, isn't it? To worry, to see if anything's really ever going to work out. But it is in our spiritual nature to always turn to Jesus, to be encouraged that it will always turn out. Jesus encouraged all of his disciples that night when he stepped onto the boat. When he and Peter got into the boat, the wind stopped. John even tells us further that when Jesus stepped onto the boat, that they were immediately on shore. Another miracle. Jesus was walking on the water of faith with them. He was there to protect them. But most importantly, to encourage them in their faith. Jesus may not encourage us by appearing in bodily form. He may not cause the physical wind to die down, especially here in West Texas. But Jesus does encourage us always in his word. He steps forward. He reaches out his hand, and he catches us. He drew us out of the water of our own baptism, forgiving our sins. He sets before us the sacred meal of Holy Communion to again forgive our sins. We have a tremendous God who has encouraged us to walk on the water of faith with him. Then those who were in the boat with him worshiped him, saying, "Truly, truly, Jesus, you are the Son of God." I'm sure you've heard this said many times before. Drastic times call for drastic measures. Should it really have taken all of those events that night on the Sea of Galilee for the disciples to confess, "Truly, you are the Son of God"? Jesus was with them all along, wasn't he? He knew exactly where they were on the sea when he was praying on the mountainside 3 miles away. Jesus is with you at all times also, even though he's on the mountainside in heaven. He sees you, knows where you're at in life, and he's there to draw you up out of the water every time. He doesn't leave you alone, but he's walking beside you or is even carrying you along. As another day develops, step out of your boat, the boat of fear, and walk on the water of faith. You will have challenges in your life, and you will be tempted to not step out. But always be encouraged when you do walk out towards Jesus. He is also walking with you.